This is a Chinese dish that you've probably never heard of.
When I was traveling around China, I was in Guizhou province and got to try their version of nuomifan, and I thought it was so delicious. So today I thought we could try to recreate it at home.
So the prep for this was pretty easy. I started out by cutting up my green onions and I went ahead and separated the whites from the greens of them. And then I also just smashed a couple cloves of garlic. So I started by adding my chicken broth to the pot. Honestly, I think you could use any broth. I don't think it matters. Then I added those green onion whites. Next, I added in the garlic cloves and I added them in as whole cloves. And I added some minced ginger, but I think you could also just use whole chunks of ginger. Then I added some dried peppers and I went ahead and opened them up so the seeds would get in and it would get spicy because Guizhou is known for their spicy food. Next, I added in some rinsed, dried, split yellow peas. You're supposed to use whole yellow peas, but I just couldn't find them. I could only find split peas. I did a half cup, but in the future I'd only do quarter cup because this was kind of a lot of peas. Now for the last couple of ingredients, I added some white pepper just for a little extra kick. If you don't have white pepper, you can use black pepper as well. And the last thing I added was salt to taste. Once everything was in, I went ahead and gave it a good stir, covered it with a pot, and then brought it up to a boil. Once it was boiling, I took the lid off and brought it down to a simmer and also gave it a good stir, especially with all those peas. I wanted to break them up and make sure they didn't stick. Now to a bowl, I added some cooked white rice, just a couple scoops. And once the broth was done and the peas were cooked, I went ahead and ladled the broth right over the cooked rice. Now, lastly, you have to add some toppings. So I added some peanuts, some green onions, as well as some cuishao. So basically they're little chunks of pork belly that you fry in its own fat. They're really tasty. I had made them previously and I had to add them to this Guizhou food. And the last thing I added was a little bit of chili oil just for a nice extra kick. And here was the final product. Of course, it wasn't totally authentic, but it was pretty close and really tasty.